Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Before we begin, remember tomorrow there will be the National Rejoin March. So the march to rejoin the European Union. I unfortunately won't be there. I sent them a message, so hopefully it will be played during the event. But there'll be some wonderful guests, including Political X, my co-host on the podcast, the Sunday Roast podcast. And incidentally, the Sunday Roast, we have two wonderful guests this Sunday. One of them is on the stream tonight, is in the chat tonight. So I won't give it away. But we had a wonderful chat about Brexit, particularly from a farming point of view. Somebody we always wanted to get on the Sunday Roast for a long time. I wanted to have an interview with her as well, but we managed to get her on, and she had a lot of very interesting things to say. So I do hope some of you will be able to make it to the National Rejoin March tomorrow. It should be a very interesting event. Should be lots of interesting people there as well, and a lot of interesting things to be said. So let's jump into the Sunday, not the Sunday Roast, but that's on Sunday. Make sure to check it out. But the live stream for tonight, so we're going to talk a bit about Brexit, of course. It's back in the news. The Tories, Bibby Stockholm is back as well, making a return. In France, Le Pen is in a bit of bother. Scottish independence we're going to talk about, and a strange story from Italy. I'll probably sneak that in somewhere near the end, I imagine. But let's start off with Brexit, of course. But before we begin, of course, I want to say hello to who I can find on the stream tonight. We have Stefan. Great to see you, Stefan. Reagan Elite is here. Thanks so much, Reagan, for also sharing the stream on Twitter. Thanks for that. We have Wim. We have Colin. Great to see you. Tiny Demolition Lover up there in Scotland. Hope you're well. We have Liam. Great to see you, Liam. Hope you're fine tonight. We have Chatty Rat in Ireland. Great to see you, Chatty. Hope you're fine. We have also Enzo the God. Great to see you once again, Enzo. Enzo is one of the first subscribers to the channel. I think you've been with the channel from the beginning, Enzo, I believe. We also have Frederick. Great to see you, Frederick. CGM. Great to have you on, CGM. Hope you're well tonight. Thanks for moderating. We also have and a clap for the moderators. Moderators always do a wonderful job. Keep the stream on the straight and narrow. And stop me from singing. We also have Mr. Peter KJ. Great to see you. We also have Oraman. Great to have you on. Liam is here. We also have Tom. Great to see you, Tom. Young Ralph is on. Great to see you, Young Ralph. Hope you'll be at the march tomorrow, if you can. Who else have we got? Jim, great to see you, Jim. Rose is here. Killer is here. Thanks for moderating along with CGM tonight. Roseanne is here. We also have who else have we got? Nicholas, 91 Leeds. Great to see you. Raven 1983 Witch, great to have you on. Daily Blase, great to see you tonight. Hope you're fine. We also have, I try and say hello to as many people as possible. It's not always possible to say hello to everyone because we're up to 126 viewers. So remember, guys, just smash the like button if you can. It helps the stream, helps the videos. We have David McGuinness. Thanks so much, David, for coming on. Hope you're well. Make sure to check out Indie Truck Davies, the Two Davies YouTube channel on everything Scottish. Some interesting stories, some interesting stuff always coming out of Scotland, but there seems to be a ramping up of events supporting a second Scottish independence referendum. We also have Woods Boy Me, great to see you. Claire Sweet, great to have you on, Claire. Hope you're fine. Mark Telfer, great to see you. Maria Sock Juice. Sock Juice. I don't know the meaning behind that name, but I'm not sure I want to know. Richard is here. Great to see you, Richard. Unquiet Spirit. Great to have you on. And so many more. Hope you're all very well. Hope you had a nice week, and hope you're ready for the weekend. We have we have a super chat from Master Templar. Thank you so much, Master Templar. UBI Max, UBI, yes. Actually, UBI got a little mention on the Sunday Roast, so do check that out on Sunday. Of course, UBI, I'm a huge supporter of UBI. There was some UBI news recently, but it's sort of gone off the radar, unfortunately. For anyone who doesn't know what a UBI is, a universal basic income, where it would lift everyone, pretty much. It would eliminate poverty overnight. You give everyone a basic income. So it's not a huge amount of money, but it's enough to live off. And as I said before, it would lift people out of poverty. It would give people opportunities. It would go alongside if you're working, if you're not working. Something like £1,000 a month or €1,000 a month, $1,000 a month, depending on where you are, for the rest of your life. It's not means tested. It's universal. Everybody gets it. Even if rich people get it, they're more likely just to give it to charity or stick it in the bank or whatever. They may not spend it, but it's actually cheaper to give £1,000 or whatever it is to rich people who won't spend it than actually have a bureaucracy determining who should get it and who shouldn't. So a means tested system is more expensive than just giving everyone the money. That's the argument against. That's one of the arguments people have against a UBI, but they don't actually understand that it'd be more expensive to means test it. It's just cheaper just to give it to everyone. And also, people who don't need it will still spend the money probably in the local community, which you want. But I promise we'll have to do some show or get somebody on the Sunday roast probably to talk about UBI, because it's a very interesting topic. Anyway, the first topic of tonight, of course, is Brexit, and the Labour Party threw the cat among the pigeons this week by talking about realigning with EU standards. Now, Keir Starmer has gone all over the place with this. He's recently come out after clarifying some of his previous statements, and he says that he doesn't want Britain to be a rule taker. Okay, but Britain is already a rule taker because it's following the rules. If it wants to, businesses want to export into the single market, well, they have to follow the rules. Anyway, this it says here, we cannot alter a Brexit deal to appease car industry, says European Commissioner. So there's a lot of pressure from the car industry to change parts of the TCA, to extend other parts of it, to help the car industry adapt to a changing world. And of course, if cars in Britain cars produced in Britain are for export into the EU single market, and if they don't meet the rules of origin, then a 10% tariff is imposed upon them. And of course, this makes them less, competitive. And the car industry don't want that. And, of course, it's not just the British car industry, it's also the European car industry, because a lot of European manufacturers have plants in Britain, and they know that, well, if you have to add an extra tariff onto those, it's going to make them less competitive. The Brexit trade deal should not be reopened just to satisfy the demands from some sectors of the UK and EU motor industry concerned about looming tariffs on electric cars, Terry Breton, the influential European Commissioner, has said. EU leaders have come under pressure to suspend 10% tariffs on electric car exports that are expected to begin in January under the Brexit trade agreement sealed by Lord Frost in 2020. But Breton, who is responsible for the EU internal market and was speaking exclusively to The Guardian, said the Commission and EU leaders are bound under competition laws to look at the entire automotive ecosystem and not favour one category in the industry over the other. He believes the trade deal should not be unpicked. It's difficult which side to fall on here, because you want more and more people to buy these electric cars, because we need to move, in that direction. You want to make it easier. And if you don't protect the EU manufacturers, the European manufacturers, also those in Britain, the Chinese manufacturers are going to benefit from that. So in a sense, it's probably better to let this go, to unpick this. But I understand the point he's making here is like you're not doing it for the entire sector, you're doing it for part of the sector, and this will be unfair. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Sarwar, so the Labour leader in Scotland, Sarwar did the Labour job to Scottish Parliament and Scottish people, lied, broke the rules in the First Minister's questions on Wednesday, writing my letter to presiding officer about it. Sorry, off topic. I didn't know about that, so thanks for that news. I think we're going to see a lot of dirty tricks being played by the Tories and the Labour Party in the run-up to the general election, especially in Scotland. We saw how, both parties are willing to work together, unfortunately, in Scotland. They work against each other in Westminster, but when it comes to Scotland, the Scots say they're two cheeks of the same arse. And that was mentioned also by a member of the SNP in the House of Commons who got a bit of a rap on the knuckles for it. But there have been a number of cases where the Labour Party and the Tories have worked together to either oust the SNP from a council seat or whatever, or stop them from winning, or try to stop them from winning. And this is, you shouldn't be working with the Tories. Like, the Tories in Scotland aren't all that different to the Tories in Westminster. I know in some ways they are. When it came to Brexit, they are. But you're helping how can you work with the Tories even if they're in Scotland? Especially if you're supposed to be a left-wing party. Ideologically, you should be more. Labour should be closer to the SNP. And if it's on council issues, that's nothing to do with Scotland's place in the Union. That's nothing to do with independence. So it makes no sense to work with the Tories to keep out the SNP. You should be working with the SNP to keep out the Tories. Thanks for that super chat, Alistair, and we will look into that. Staying with Brexit, of course, is going to dominate some of the European issues or Brexit itself, but migration could be dissolving force for EU, says Bloc's top diplomat. Migration could be a dissolving force for the European Union due to deep cultural differences between European countries and their long-term inability to reach a common policy, the EU's most senior diplomat has said. Although Russia will try to fan the flames on immigration inside Europe, Josep Borrell denied that the conflict in Ukraine was contributing to the crisis, which he described as a decades-old problem fueled by wars and poverty in departure countries. I have real concerns with European Union expansion. I think this idea that by 2030 it looks like the European Union is going to expand to up to 36 members. So it's gone from 27 to 36. It's going to bring in a whole load of smaller countries, mainly in Eastern Europe. And I have nothing against these countries per se, but I think the European Union will have to reform. Things like the veto may need to go, because you can't have 36 members or 35 members being blocked by one country. The 36 member, whoever they are, saying, no, I don't want to go ahead. And there has been some of this already with, for example, Hungary, coming to, when it comes to condemnation of the Russian operation in Ukraine. So the European Union will need to reform before it gets bigger. And if it expands too quickly, especially with a lot of new countries coming in, a lot of poorer countries coming in, the richer nations will need to help them out, and I fully support that. Ireland is one of the richest countries in Europe at the moment. It now is their time to contribute. Ireland benefited hugely in the early days of EU membership or European Community membership. Ireland has to give back now. It only makes sense to help those other countries. We need to have everyone living at the same level, if possible, or as close as possible to that as it is, as possibly it is. Sorry. So it's going to be difficult. You have at the moment you have the countries in the north of Europe which are not so happy with so much money going to countries like Spain, Italy, and Greece. They believe that there should be more reforms, economic reforms in those countries before they get more and more money. Countries like the Netherlands is is very resistant to more support for countries, particularly in the south. And this creates political conflict. And, each country has its own internal problems, internal political issues that need to be resolved. So I am concerned if France should be kicked out. I am concerned with expansion if it's too quickly. I'm not against expansion per se, but I am worried if it happens too quickly, there is a risk. And of course, the issue of immigration, where it's not something Europe can really control. If people are coming across the Mediterranean from another continent, be it due to war, be it due to climate change, there's very little Europe can do about that. It can try and support individual countries in North Africa, try and help them rebuild their economies, try to help them, or in more draconian ways try to convince those governments to stop the boats, in a way, to steal a phrase from who. But there's very little the European Union can do. So it has to adapt to this. It has to adapt, to this issue. Labour has always had poor leaders. Let me read some of the comments in the chat, because I don't want it to be top heavy where I'm just talking and I'm not looking at what you guys are saying. Doesn't feel like that from Ireland, judged by the HSC schools. Yes, Mr. Peter J. K. Ireland has a very rich economy. It has a lot of money, budget surpluses. But where is the money going? That's the fundamental question. Housing. Why isn't there sufficient public and affordable housing being built? Like, they can't say, well, we don't have the money, because of course they have the money. It's not, an emerging economy. It's not an economy. It's not like Ireland in the 1980s. The state have the money. They decide not to spend it. When it comes to the HSC, the Health Service Executive, like the NHS in Britain, they can't say they don't have enough money. They have to pump, but just pumping money probably isn't the thing. They need to hold on to staff. I know there have always been issues with staffing levels. There have always been issues with people lying on trolleys, waiting for treatment because there aren't enough beds. Why aren't there enough beds? Because there aren't enough staff. Why isn't there enough staff? Because probably the paying conditions are not sufficient. And there are numerous stories of nurses and doctors leaving Ireland to work abroad because the pay is better and the conditions are better. So the government can fix those problems, better pay and better conditions. You have to do that if you want to retain the staff, if you want to fix the problem. But I think it stems from paying conditions for nurses and doctors. But these have been problems for decades. I remember, 20 years ago, we were talking about issues within the healthcare. And of course, Ireland has a particular case of it has a growing private healthcare sector. And this is concerning because if you have money, you just go private and you jump the queue. And you can't have you can't have a government that just relies on the private sector, especially when it comes to health. Not without a revolution. There is a hope that Sinn Féin will get into power at the next election. They'll probably go into coalition with Fianna Fáil. That's probably going to be a very bitter pill to swallow. But it's the only way probably that they will form a government. And you would hope that they would start, okay, now let's invest in social and public housing, social and affordable housing. Let's invest in the healthcare executive. Let's make sure that we have enough doctors and nurses and prioritize those things. I had an Irish surgeon operate on me, really pleased with his work. That's good to hear. Tax the rich, their fair due, and fund the healthcare system. See, when it comes to, I don't know if you're talking about ukulele lab. I don't know if you're talking about Ireland, but for Ireland, it's not really an issue of money. I don't think it's an issue of money. It's an issue of where the money is going. And reforms need to take place because in some ways, I don't know if this is still true or this was ever true, but I remember one of the arguments was that the consultants, the hospital consultants, are blocking a lot of this because they work in the private sector and the public sector, and they want to funnel as many patients as possible into the private sector so they can make extra money. So they don't want more doctors because then there would be competition. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the impression that a lot of people had, 20 years ago. So changes have to take place, but the government don't want to make the changes because the consultants are a very powerful lobby. And, sometimes they either donate to the political parties, or sometimes politicians can be consultants or lawyers or whatever themselves. They have that on the side. So there is an incentive for them to protect their particular interest. Prices may increase with UBI, especially with property. That's a possibility, but it's important that whatever UBI is brought in, it increases in accordance with inflation. So if inflation goes up by 6 or 7%, the UBI would increase by 6 or 7%. So it would be tied to inflation. Now, there is a concern that it could feed into inflation, but generally, when you give money to people, they spend it. When you give money to the rich alone, they spend it on assets, and they drive up asset prices. And asset prices are the real issue here. We've seen over the last number of months in Britain in particular, wages have not increased, but inflation is still rising. Well, not rising, it has declined somewhat over the last couple of months, but it's still higher than pay rises. So it's not a case of giving people, if you give people money, it's not always the case that it results in inflation or a really damaging level of inflation. Excuse me. Anyway, let's move on. Sticking with Brexit, this is what the Mayor of London had to say about Keir Starmer's comments.
Mayor, about Sam Coates' exclusive for Sky News yesterday. Sir Keir Starmer captured as saying, as it relates to renegotiating terms with the EU, quote, actually, we don't want to diverge. Do you think the City of London, the financial sector, will welcome that?
So I meet almost on a daily basis, probably weekly basis, business leaders from across our city. And some of the challenges they're reporting back to me are in relation to the challenges of doing business in the European Union, in relation to a skills shortage, in relation to the cost of doing business in the EU. And I think Keir Starmer is right to say, look, the current deal we have with the European Union has got big problems in it. Some would characterise it, I would, as an extreme hard Brexit deal. It's right that we look into having a better deal with the European Union. This deal that Boris Johnson negotiated with the European Union is up for review anyway in 2025. And why wouldn't a new government that wants our country to be doing better in terms of GDP, in terms of trading goods and services, in terms of investment, look sector by sector at the deal we have with the EU and improve it?
Can it be improved upon? See, it's important that people don't mistake that this review in 2025 is just a review. It's not a renegotiation. And unfortunately, I've heard a number of journalists now call it a renegotiation. And that Keir Starmer is going to renegotiate a better deal or try to negotiate a better deal in 2025. No, that's not going to happen. This needs to be clarified. So it's going to be a review. They're going to sit down and go, okay, what has gone well, what has not gone well, and let's see if we can improve on what didn't go well. And I've said this before, the European Union is not complaining about the TCA. I haven't heard any complaints from official sources or unofficial sources in the EU. They haven't said, no, we're this TCA is not working, we need to have it fixed. No. So how do you negotiate? If it was a negotiation, how are you going to negotiate with a party that is happy with the current, reasonably happy with the current state of affairs? You can't. So you have to offer something else if you want some sort of change. And what has the UK got to offer? Arc Office says, could you highlight a new documentary, new light film or liked film, to see ourselves? Hysterically funny, desperately sad, thought-provoking documentary. The BBC refused it. So yes, if is it available on YouTube, or maybe there's a website we can see it. So definitely, if people can see that, do check it out. Sounds interesting to see ourselves. So I'll check it out later if I can. If it's on YouTube, I'll definitely look at it, and if it's not, I'll have a look online for where it is. Thanks for sharing that.
So specifically, I mean, clearly, financial services is a huge part of the British economy, but specifically the London economy, and regulation is a big part of that industry itself. Specifically for the City of London, do you think closer alignment with EU financial regulations would be welcomed?
So this Prime Minister promised things like financial passporting, promised making sure that the City of London didn't suffer as a consequence of us being outside the European Union. Unfortunately, there are big challenges to those businesses in the City of London doing remarkably good work in difficult circumstances. I think we should be looking into how the City of London can make it easier to do business with Brussels and Frankfurt and other parts of the European Union. But also what we don't want is investors in other parts of the world, whether it's the USA, Singapore, Hong Kong, choosing to invest in those financial services businesses in the EU at the expense of London. I'd rather London be a bridge and a springboard for those investors and businesses outside of Europe to go and trade with the European Union, as well as trade in London and our country.
And does that come...
It's absolutely insane that not Rishi Sunak, but Boris Johnson and Lord Frost were focusing on fishing in 2020. You know, the European Commission were looking at this and going, what's wrong with these people? Why are they talking about fishing all the time? Do you remember that? In 2020, fishing is the soul of Britain, no pun intended. And when we actually looked into it, it's the fish that are caught in Britain are not eaten in Britain, because it's a type of oily fish that British people don't like. But the fish that are caught by the Norwegians in particular are sold in Britain. So Brits don't like eating the fish that are caught in their waters. And you have the Brexiteers saying, we need to be able to catch more of our fish. Okay, but you catch the fish, and then what do you do with it? Because you don't want to eat it. And, you know, John Redwood can keep banging on about we need to convince people to eat this. But if people don't like it, it's going to be very difficult. You can try and, fill it with, cover it with all sorts of spices and stuff, maybe to cover the taste or the texture. But, generally, if people don't like that type of fish, people like, for example, cod. But cod is not normally caught in British waters, as far as I know. It's caught in other parts of the North Sea. But also, we have to remember that when it came to protecting stocks, which the Brexiteers were like, we don't want to be involved in any sort of European thing. Fish migrate. Fish move around the sea. They don't stay in one area. They spawn or whatever. They lay their eggs in one area. The little fish grow, and then they migrate to different parts of the sea or the ocean. That's how they are. But some of those, they cross borders. So they can't become British fish or Irish fish or European fish. They're off the ocean. Like, all of this was really... Haddock is apparently a far superior beast to cod. But it's all of this is like people not understanding something. And I'm not an expert on these things as well, but I'm not pushing this is what you should be doing. The people who didn't understand anything were saying, were confident in their ignorance. It's like, I don't know everything, but I'm confident that it will work. It's like the video I uploaded earlier where Robert Jenrick was like, he was saying, well, if we process more cases, this won't bring down the backlog, or this won't stop the boat. No, it was if we process more claims, this won't bring down the backlog. And she's like, well, what evidence do you have to back up that claim that it doesn't work? And he said, it's my feeling. So that's all it was. Brexit is a feeling. It's if I believe it will work, it will work. But that doesn't work if you have, 25 documents to complete for and a veterinary health certificate. You can't believe that you don't have to fill in the documents, and then your goods will arrive in the single market. Absolutely insane. So going on to what Keir Starmer has said also, Labour in power would not want to diverge from EU. So I covered this already. Keir Starmer has gone further than before in outlining his vision in a future UK relationship with the EU, saying Labour doesn't want to diverge in comments that were immediately seized on by the Conservatives. The Labour leader was speaking at an event in Canada, bringing together liberal and left-leaning politicians, where he said that most of the conflict since Brexit has arisen because the UK wants to diverge and do something different to the rest of our EU partners. Our EU partners. Actually, we don't want to diverge. We don't want to lower our lower standards. We don't want to lower standards. We don't want to rip up environmental standards for people that work, food standards for the rest of us, rest of it. He said during a question. Yeah, so he's talking here about we don't want to reduce standards. We want to follow EU standards. This makes sense. But the natural response from the Brexiteers is, but if we're following their standards, we're rule takers. We're not rule makers. But they never want to take the next step and say, oh, well, let's become rule makers. Oh, no, we better not become rule makers. Because if it's EU standards, which you have to follow if you want to export into the single market, then you have to be a rule taker. You are a rule taker at the moment. If you're exporting into the EU and you're a third country, you're following the standards. Otherwise, you can't export. It'll be rejected. So you have to follow the standards. But wouldn't it make more sense if Britain was at the table making the standards as well? Because the Labour Party say we want to have higher standards. Wouldn't it be great if all of Europe had these higher standards? Wouldn't it be great to have this floor where the standards don't fall below? Because the big problem here is that even if Keir Starmer and the Labour Party increase the standards, what's to stop the next government coming in and lowering the standards? Because, well, we don't care about the European Union. I don't see it happening, because I think a lot of the Brexiteers will lose their seats at the next election, but it's not a guarantee.
Last month, the news was sort of snuck out that after spending a significant sum of money on developing a UK-specific safety mark, which had already been postponed on several occasions because all the stuff, and this is what you call the rule of Rees-Mogg, all the stuff that they told you was going to be better is so bad that they have to keep postponing it. That was actually announced, if you like, last month, and that deliberately and categorically involves the UK government refusing to diverge from European Union rules. That is literally law. That is literally a failure, a reluctance, a refusal to introduce legislation that would have seen us diverge from EU legislation. It would have given us our own UK safety mark. And it doesn't make the front page of the Daily Mail. When Keir Starmer says we're not going to diverge from EU rules, that involves Keir Starmer lets cat out of bag on Brexit betrayal. I can find it in Mail Online. I don't know whether it made the actual paper. Rishi Sunak performs another Brexit climb down as PM allows British firms to continue using EU CE safety mark. So that is literally and categorically the government, what's the word I'm looking for? Passing up an opportunity to diverge from EU rules. And yet when Keir Starmer says we don't want to diverge from EU rules, in exactly the same areas, it's a front page story designed to inflame the gammon.
That's true. What I love about James O'Brien is that he holds the media to account. He doesn't really hold the government to account. Yes, he criticises Rishi Sunak and also Keir Starmer on the occasion. But he generally holds the media to account because that's where he came from. And that's his forte. And he's really good at it. And he points it out perfectly. You know, when Rishi Sunak refused to diverge from EU standards, the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Express, none of them, not a dicky bird. But as soon as Keir Starmer said, we're actually going to maintain this alignment with EU standards, they lose their heads. They have a meltdown. And why do they do this? It's because they don't want to touch the Tories. They're Tory newspapers. Whatever the Tories do is always good. Whatever Boris Johnson did was perfectly fine. As soon as Keir Starmer or the Labour Party do something, it doesn't have to be anything controversial. Do you remember they ran 10 days of front page news, the Daily Mail, I think it was, on Currygate, on on Keir Starmer having a curry. And it turned out to be nothing because it was a work event. So he hadn't broken any rules or any guidance. This is the problem. The media poisons people's minds. The right-wing media in particular poisons. Now, we heard this story, was it today or yesterday, that Rupert Murdoch is going to resign from his position as chairman of Fox. No, what's the name? Is it Fox? No, I don't remember. News Corp. Sorry, News Corp group or whatever it is. His son is probably slightly less bad, but he's as right wing, pretty much as right wing, but not as bad, it seems. But you know, this has been a person who has poisoned British politics for the best part of 40 years. Using his media outlet. He's not even a British citizen, he's Australian. And he was able to poison politics to a level where people were... I don't know if you want to connect it to the murder of an MP or a candidate. You know, that people's minds were poisoned that much that somebody went out and murdered an MP. Joe Cox. Is it his fault? I don't know. But I think the rhetoric that has come out of his newspapers is directed at people like that to convince those. You saw the newspaper articles during the Brexit saga, the mid-Brexit saga at its peak, you know, calling judges traitors. Like, that's the type of language that carries a lot of weight, and all you need is the right idiot to go, I'm going to do something about it. Thank you, Daily Mail, or thank you, The Sun, or thank you, The Express, or whatever. I'm going to do something about it. I know it's not all down to Rupert Murdoch, but he was the driving force behind this sort of tabloid crap. These rags. They're not designed to inform people. They're designed to whip up hatred. News Corp. Oh, the irony. Yes. Anyway, he's right there. Anyways, one final thing on Brexit, then we'll take a little break.
Our joint and strong view is that the key to this is growth.
But wouldn't the single most effective way to improve growth in Britain would be to look at rejoining the single market? And you've said again today, there is no case. Now, no case is a very strong thing to say, and it's difficult to believe that you really think that.
See, the problem with all of this... Okay, first of all, let's just park for a moment. The UK can't rejoin the single market. It has to join the EU first. But Keir Starmer is in a position, whether it's Keir Starmer's fault or not, but he seems to be in a position where he can't say, actually, this is what we have to do. Because as soon as he says this is what we're going to have to do, the right-wing media is going to come down on him like a ton of bricks. And right-wing gammons are going to lose their minds. As we saw before, if Sunak does it, perfectly okay. Not a peep from the Brexiteers. But as soon as his opponent, Rishi Sunak's opponent, Keir Starmer, even hints at something like this, it's a disaster. And it seems to be once again this case, the case of the tail wagging the dog. And what I mean by that is you have this red wall or this fantasy section of society that Keir Starmer has to pander to. We don't talk about Brexit. We don't talk about rejoining the European Union. We don't talk about actually fixing these problems. We don't talk about spending money. We don't talk about rebuilding schools. We don't talk about nationalising the NHS. We don't talk about those things because there's a small section of society we need to pander to. And as soon as we say something like that, these people are going to be angry. This isn't democracy.
No case means under no circumstances, never. It's not really what you're saying.
We've had low growth for 13 years. So the argument that this is all down to Brexit just doesn't wash.
You've used a very absolute phrase, which is there is no case. That means never. Is that really what you're saying?
There's no case for going back into the EU. We've had a referendum. The country has decided. We've been through a huge period of uncertainty as a result, and there's no case for going back. But that does not mean that we have any less ambition on growth. It does not mean that we haven't got a very strong growth plan. The frustration is that, the longer it takes.
Reagan Elise, Brad, thanks so much for that super chat. News scrap. Yes, news, not News Corp, but news scrap. Well said. Reagan is correct. Max, he's too scared of the right-wing media. It shouldn't be like that. The media should just report. When was it that opinion replaced news? When did that happen? Because this has destroyed the media. It's no longer, let's report on what Keir Starmer has said, let's hold him to account. No, he has said this, so that what we're going to do is attack him. Rishi Sunak, our guy, has said exactly the same thing. And you know the best example of this? It's not exactly political, but it's a very good yardstick to use. Whenever Kate Middleton does something, and Meghan Markle does exactly the same thing, look at how the right-wing media respond. Kate Middleton, trips, and they, oh my goodness, how, the poor lady, what are we going to do? Let's have a week of mourning or something because she tripped. If Meghan Markle, I'm no fan of any of these people, but if Meghan Markle tripped, they'd be like, oh, what is she? Is she on drugs? Is she drinking? Was she drunk? Was she intoxicated? What is she drinking? Why isn't she looking after her children? Is she a bad mother? These are the types of things they would come up with. Whether they believe it or not, or whether it's just to funnel traffic to their websites and to get clicks and likes, I don't know. Probably that's part of it. It's a money making grift. The more you talk about, if you're within this grift, within this circle, the more you talk, you bring on these so-called royal experts, and they rant and rave about how Harry hates his family and Harry hated the Queen, and Harry was the prodigal son, but he never returned. Stuff like this. Oh God. Anyway.
Takes before we have a general election, the more we have the hallmark of this government, which is chop, change your mind, stop, start. Rachel's had 4 chancellors to shadow. I've had 3 prime ministers. This is the definition of the failure of the last few years.
Okay. Guys, let's take a break. Enough from this for a moment.
Colin from Portsmouth is on the line. Hello, Colin. How are you? Yes.
I thought that Rishi Sunak was just pulling a desperate U-turn to appease those in his party who still like Liz Truss and the 800 people in Uxbridge who want more kids to have asthma.
That's right. Don't forget them.
He's changing everything.
I know. He's saving the planet, Colin. Just a little bit slower.
Look at the things he stopped. We nearly had 7 bins, one of them just for wallpaper. Bonkers.
I know.
We nearly had a meat tax. Vegans were going to get tax breaks. Labour wanted a wind farm in every bedroom. He scrapped that. Ceilings were to be lowered in every building. Scrapped. Driving on the opposite side of the road every Sunday. Scrapped.
Yep.
Bouncy castles to become listed buildings. Scrapped. Every National Trust property to have a trance room. Scrapped. Doctors to cut your testicles at every single appointment. Scrapped. Des Lynam to take over the post office. Scrapped. Renaming the points of the compass to commemorate powerful women in history. Scrapped. Folding up second homes when you're not using them. Scrapped. Guide dogs to wear roller skates. Scrapped. Greek Orthodox dimmer switches. Scrapped. Compulsory car sharing with someone who's appeared in Condone with me. Scrapped. Bill Gates to put your gran in a headlock. Scrapped. What's Keir Starmer doing, Anthony?
What's he doing?
He's asleep at the wheel. There's only one man saving this country, and it's 7 bin Sunak.
Absolutely.
Anyway, mate, thanks for having me on. Love to the family.
Love to the family, Colin. Love to the family.
Whoever was in charge the last 13 years nearly made it a right mess.
Oh.
Almost. David McGuinness, thanks so much for that super chat. I keep hearing this growth pish. What makers is this growth going to take place? Yeah. What makers is this growth going to take place in? They keep talking about growth, but where is the growth going to take place? When it comes to Brexit is like driving around with a handbrake on. So yeah, you can move forward, but if you release the handbrake, you can go much faster. So yes, it's possible for the economy to grow, but it will be limited. by Brexit, because Brexit means that you're not able to get the workers you need. It's disencouraging investment. It's added paperwork. So you get rid of those things, then you can truly grow. But nobody wants to talk about that. Anyway, let's move on. Bibby Stockholm gets satisfactory test results for Legionella. They're quite similar. The Bibby Stockholm barge has had satisfactory test results for Legionella after tests initially found the presence of the potentially deadly bacteria, The Guardian has learned. The Home Office, which hopes to hold hundreds of people seeking asylum on the barge in Portland, received the most recent Legionella results on the 4th of September, and government sources said that they're not planning to make the results public. Why? The Guardian obtained the results in Freedom of Information data from Dorset Council. Why would the government not release this information? That's a bit of a head scratcher. Is it like, if it was negative, or I don't know, positive in the sense, if they had discovered it again, you could sort of understand why the Home Office wouldn't want the data released. But this is good news, isn't it, for the Home Office? But they don't want the information released. Now it could be the case that they don't want it released, but they want to do it in some sort of fanfare. They want to say, "See, welcome aboard, everyone. We're going to have a bit of streamers and balloons and fireworks now that it's safe to use, or safer." In these most recent results, all of the water samples tested for Legionella were deemed satisfactory. What does that not mean negative? Although some of the bacteria were identified in some of the samples. In the previous sets of tests, at least some of the samples tested to be found unsatisfactory for Legionella. What does satisfactory and unsatisfactory mean? Would it not be positive and negative? I presume you'd want negative results coming back. David McGinnis, thanks so much, David. Markets Max. Where is the growth going to take place in the markets? You can't, like, the international markets, you can't rely on, if I'm understanding correctly. The international markets are not going to lend money to the UK economy if they think it's going to stagnate for the next number of years. One bin needed for Legionella. They're going to need a lot more bins than 7, it seems. In the worst results related to samples on the 9th of August, 2 days after the asylum seekers were briefly put on the barge. They were removed just after just 4.5 days. In these results, 8 out of the 11 tests were that were unsatisfactory, and 3 were borderline. Some of the bacteria found was the deadliest strain, Legionella pneumophilia serogroup 1. The second Freedom of Information request to Cornwall Council revealed that the barge was not inspected for Legionella while in Formouth for checks and repairs before it was moved to Portland. Why? The third Freedom of Information request revealed that the Home Office has used water safety risk assessments for the Bibby Stockholm that were more than 6 years out of date. The Home Office said a more up-to-date risk assessment had subsequently been signed off. So using out-of-date risk assessments. Well done. Alistair, thanks so much. That's your counts still theirs. Below 20 counts are not readable, Max. Okay, so it's not. It doesn't come back as negative. It comes back as a certain level. You'll always have a certain level. It just has to be below the safety. Thanks for that information, Alistair. Spokesperson for the Home Office, barge contractor CTM, confirmed that the repairs to the plumbing were underway after the inspection from Wessex Water found failings. In media interviews on Wednesday, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, said various procedures needed to be completed before people could return to the Bibby Stockholm, but the government had done really well with its work on the barge. Beyond Borders, Tutney and District, an organisation that is supporting some of the men taken off the barge, said none wanted to return. They found the barge intolerable and claustrophobic. It is utter prison-like, a spokesperson said. This is spending 4 days. People could be put on this barge for up to a year. What sort of damage is this going to do to people's mental health? It's a prison. It's basically a prison. A floating prison. And one of the problems is not just, bacteria that's likely to come back. If it's not this, it could be some other bacteria. But it's also the issue of fire safety. That's why the firefighting union condemned this as a death trap. As they said, that it's not safe to put people on, and it's not safe for us to send our members to put out a fire on. Anyway, moving on. Some good news for a change. Marine Le Pen should stand trial over alleged misuse of EU funds, says prosecutors. The Paris prosecutor's office has recommended that the far-right leader Marine Le Pen and 26 members of her National Rally Party should stand trial over alleged misuse of EU funds. I wonder if Nigel Farage can be dragged before this as well. The request, which will be considered by judges, comes after a 7-year investigation into allegations that the party, then called the Front National, had used funds destined for EU parliamentary assistance to pay staff who were instead working for the party between 2004-2016. EU lawmakers are allocated funds to cover expenses, including their assistants, but are not meant to be used for party expenses. Rules state that the assistants paid by the European Parliament must work directly on Strasbourg parliamentary matters. What I find funny about these is that they're so mean. The right-wing politicians are so mean that they'll use money that they have lots of money, and instead of actually using their own money, they'll try and use money that they receive from, like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is supposed to be a billionaire, but he's whenever he gets into trouble, he puts out these funding campaigns. Please help me fund my legal expenses. Donate here. Like, he's supposed to be a billionaire. Why is he going around begging people for money? The right wing do this all the time. They claim to be really rich, and a lot of them are, but they're always with their hand out looking for cash. Please help me. I'm struggling at the moment. If you want to help fund Le Pen's legal fees, don't forget when donating to tick the little box. Grift 8. Well said, Brad. Peter, thanks much, Brad. Thanks much, Peter. Instead of a fortnightly collection with 7 bins, you get a collection every 2 days. That'd be good. That'd be a good idea. Although it'd be difficult to fill up the bins in 2 days. Anyway, the case involves 11 MEPs, including Le Pen and her 95-year-old father. He's still around. He's still kicking about. The former party leader, Jean-Marie Le Pen, as well as 12 parliamentary assistants and 4 party collaborators. The party itself faces charges of concealing the wrongdoing. Instead of actually coming forward and saying, I'm sorry, we messed up. Here is all the paperwork, and just, deal with that. No, let's try and hide it. Trying to hide stuff from the European Union is a very bad idea. And they have very deep pockets, and they can afford very expensive lawyers. So it's not a good idea to go against the European Union. Have they not looked at recent cases of like Facebook and Apple? Apple have very deep pockets, but they caved to the European Union. Facebook, the same. Very, very massive bank account. But when it came to fighting the EU, they're like, okay, no, we can't. So it's, God. Anyway. Don't see, she won't be put in prison or anything. It'll just be probably a fine and a slap on the wrist. But it could be some ammunition that the left can use against her and her party in the parliament, I hope. So, moving...
The SNP's leadership reckons...
moving up north to Scotland, it seems that the SNP are looking for other ways to get the ball moving again on independence. Now, for independence campaigners, the ball has never stopped rolling, but the media have taken their eye off this ball for a long time. And it seems, from media coverage, the issue of Scottish independence has sort of gone away in the media mindset. I'm not saying for the Scottish people. So when it comes to the British media, now we start talking about Scottish independence again because the SNP are pushing it. So under Nicola Sturgeon, the support had reached epic levels, new record levels. So it's important that support is maintained. So I think this is why the SNP are pushing so hard, and especially if there's a general election just around the corner. Of course, they're going to put it front and centre.
It's come up with a new way to try and drive for another referendum on Scottish independence. The party's membership is going to be asked to back a plan to demand another vote if the SNP wins the most seats in Scotland at the next general election, not an outright majority, as had been the policy before. I've been speaking to the SNP's leader at Westminster, Stephen Flynn. Now, I want to talk to you about independence.
Always happy to.
Yep, I bet. Hamza Yousaf is setting out his plan to achieve Scottish independence. Now, he says that he's going to push for a second independence referendum if the SNP wins the most seats at the next election. So not a majority, the most seats. Is that, do you support that?
Absolutely. I mean, we're operating on a first-past-the-post system. At a general election, if the Labour Party or the Conservative Party win the most seats, then they have a mandate to implement their manifesto. Our manifesto is going to be very clear on page 1, line 1. It's going to say that a vote for the Scottish National Party is a vote for independence. And if we win a majority of seats, then we'll seek to give democratic effect to that. I think that's a proportionate thing to do, and I think it's something the Scottish public will support.
Well, it makes sense, the majority of seats. Because there's no point saying, well, the majority of votes, because it's not, the parliament is not based on the majority of votes, it's based on the majority of seats. So if they win the most seats, then they will present this as a mandate. You could turn it around and say, well, when it came to 2019, a majority of people voted for Brexit or getting Brexit done. The Conservatives won the most seats. Did a majority of voters support getting Brexit done? No, but that's the parliamentary system. Like, you can complain. It's a bit like and people will say, well, this is moving the goalpost. No, it's not really, because if you look at the Electoral College in the United States, you can say, well, Hillary won in 2016. Hillary won the common vote, the popular vote, but she didn't win the Electoral College. But at the end of the day, it's the Electoral College that matters. So it's the number of seats that matter. So if the SNP win a majority, they win most of the seats, then they have the mandate. They are the biggest party. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Free in 24, Max. Free. So next year in 2024. Free in. That's a nice hashtag. Free in 24.
Putting aside the fact that people vote in general elections for lots of reasons, cost of living crisis, for example, just to name one other issue that people might be voting on. So firstly, you're arguing you want the election to be a mandate for an independence referendum, even if the majority of people vote against independence, for parties who are anti-independence.
So we're going to be clear in our manifesto, which is the basis of which people...
But the SNP is not responsible for other parties' manifestos. Like, this is a bit like saying back in 2019, but a majority of people voted against the Conservatives. Yes, a majority of people vote. This is not you vote for the SNP and you get independence. This is if a majority of seats go to the SNP, they're going to hold a referendum. Referendum does not mean that Scotland is independent. That means we're giving people the choice if they want to go with independence or they want to stay part of the union. Like, the framing of this by Sophia Rage is a bit dishonest, because she's trying to present it as, well, a majority of people, like, people will vote Labour, but they might want a referendum. I'm not saying a lot of them. Like, traditional people who say, I like the idea of a referendum, but I don't support the SNP. There are people who vote ALBA Party, who want a referendum but don't support the SNP. So you can't say a majority, but it's pointless saying a majority of people voted, like in 2019, a majority of people voted against Brexit and the Tory Brexit Party. Yes, if you put them all together, Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, SNP, if you put all them together, yes, they're bigger than the vote for the Conservatives, but that's not how it works.
Vote for political parties, that a vote for the SNP is a vote for Scottish independence.
Yeah, but if you don't get a majority, if the majority of people in Scotland vote for parties that
don't... But it's not a majority of the votes, it's a majority in Parliament.
Support independence. How is that a mandate for independence? Am I missing something?
No. What we're saying quite clearly is that in a Westminster context, it's done by proportionality of seats. So we're saying if we win a majority of seats, which I'm very confident that we will in the general election next year, then that'll be a mandate for us to give democratic effect to independence.
But you're not saying majority. You're saying the most seats, not a majority, isn't it?
That's of course. Now, if the UK government wants to come to us and say, well, that's fine, you can have your independence, and I'd love that. What I would expect to happen is for them to come to the table to have that grown-up democratic discussion about how we empower...
See, this is all just about a referendum. This is not about Scotland becoming independent. So this is a vote for a second referendum. There's no guarantee that if there was a referendum tomorrow, the polls point to a majority supporting independence, but there's no guarantee. But you have to at least give people the choice. It's like, at least if you say, okay, we have a majority... in the Scottish Parliament, the Westminster Parliament, we've negotiated with them. They said, yes, well, we'll give you a Section 30, or we'll just let you have your referendum. Then the campaigns should begin. The campaigns, like the independence campaign, has been going on for a long time. But the unionist campaign, I presume, would begin then. So you'd have the Liberal Democrats, you'd have the Labour Party, and you'd have the Conservatives working together saying, we want to defend the Union. We want to convince the Scottish people that the future is in the Union. And shouldn't people have the right to vote on that? I really don't understand this response of, we shouldn't allow the Scottish people to vote. This has nothing to do with the SNP. You can hate the SNP from morning till night, but it doesn't make any difference about whether the people of Scotland should be allowed to vote. I don't understand this.
The people of Scotland to determine their own future. Now, that may well be a transfer of powers from Westminster to Holyrood to hold an independence referendum. That may well be just agreeing to an independence.
No, the LC, I thought a vote for the SNP was a de facto vote for independence. No need for a referendum. But I think they're talking now about some people were talking about that. I think that was at one stage. But that's no longer the policy. So the policy has changed. That it would be, a vote for the SNP would be, if we have a majority in Parliament, in Scottish Parliament, then we'll have an independence. But I think the problem with that is that you need the UK government on board. There has to be a negotiation. So I think, I'm not a huge fan of referenda, but I think in this case you have to have a referendum. But unfortunately, Scotland's hands are tied when it comes to referendum because they need the UK government on board. So you can hold, your own referendum, but if it's not recognised by the UK Parliament, then it's not really going to go anywhere.
Independence referendum. But, when it comes to this big constitutional issue, I think the question must be for the Labour Party and the Conservatives, at what point are they going to allow the people of Scotland to determine their own future?
Well, probably not at the point where the majority of people in a general election vote against independence.
Well, I would guess. Well, what we would be standing on is winning the majority of seats. And as I say, I'm very confident that we would do that. And we would seek to give implementation to our manifesto on that basis. But look, you mentioned the cost of living crisis.
Alex Salmon.
See, the only person who can dissolve Parliament is the King. Used to be the Queen, now it's the King. So if the King can dissolve Parliament, then can the King dissolve the Union? Because maybe the SNP should go to the King and say, look, Charles, it's a nice bit of land you've got up there. Shame if anything were to happen. No. But if, say, look, this union is not working. We want out. UK Parliament isn't playing ball. So what do? Well, you're the only one. Maybe you're the only one who can solve this. Maybe the king is the only one who can solve this, who can say to the Scottish Parliament and the Westminster Parliament, you have to go your separate ways. Scotland's hands have been tied for over 300 years. I don't see, like, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm relying on people in the chat. I know a lot of experts here from Scotland, including people from the SNP, but I don't know the way out of this, because it seems to be the only way to get a referendum is asking Westminster, and the Tories don't want to do it, and Keir Starmer is not very happy with is not very open to the idea. Look, Charles, what the fuck? But I don't, still, you have to rely on somebody. It's like being, it's a bit like being in a rented accommodation, and there are 4 people in the flat, and you want to leave, but one of them says, no, you can't leave. You can't leave without my permission. Then how do you leave? You say, can I please leave? No, I'm not going to give you my permission. Like, you can try and walk out, but then you have nowhere to go. Like, in the sense that if Scotland were to try and unilaterally leave the Union, is that even possible? But if it's not recognised on the world stage, if Scotland is not recognised as an independent country, it's going to have a lot of problems. So it makes sense from a political point of view. And once again, I'm not an expert on these things. Maybe I'm talking a big pile of pish with a H. Can Scotland find a way out that doesn't include asking Westminster? Because people have said, you go down the UN route, lobby member states of the United Nations. Out the door in 24, Max Humza says a majority of seats we are leaving, not another referendum. But if Westminster says no, what happens then? Thanks, David. David is an expert. David McGuinness is certainly an expert on these things. So I don't know if I'm asking the right questions here. Is it possible for the not my king feck the monarchy? No, and I agree 100%. But could the king have a role to play here? Could he have a role? Could he be the one who will say, look, let's let their people go, let the Scots go because they don't want to be here? Like, why would you want people to stay if they don't want to stay? Of course, it's an economic argument. North Sea oil, the Scottish economy, all of these things contribute to the UK exchequer. That's why they don't want Scotland to go. And no Prime Minister really wants to be the one that is seen as the one who destroyed the Union. But the Union is shot. The Union is in serious trouble. Northern Ireland is diverging, of course, because of Brexit. And the Scottish people, there's growing support for independence. And the Tories are fueling that support. Tories are the worst unionists in the history of unionism. Anyway, guys, moving on. There's a story here in Italy that got my blood boiling a little bit. You think there are headbangers in Britain? You think you think what's his name? Jonathan Gules is pretty bad. Well, in Italy we have perhaps even worse than Jonathan Gules and Jacob Rees-Mogg. Italian MP calls for museum director to be sacked for being racist towards Italians. So an Italian politician is pushing for the director of a prestigious museum to be kicked out, arguing that he has been racist towards Italians in a move that has raised a debate over apparent attempts by Giorgia Meloni's far-right government to wield a tighter grip over culture. You have to remember that fascists are, they love culture. Fascists love history. They love this idea of bringing, like fascists in particular in Italy want to bring back the Roman Empire. Mussolini wanted to do that, and people like Giorgia Meloni and her Brothers of Italy party want, they want to resuscitate aspects of the Roman Empire and, of course, Mussolini's dictatorship and fascist dictatorship. Anyway, Andrea Crippa deputy leader of the League Party, which is a member of Meloni's ruling coalition, said Cristiano Greco, who has managed the Egyptian Museum in the northern city of Turin since 2014, was a left-wing director. It's like a left-wing lawyer, a left-wing museum curator. Never heard of those before. Who was running the museum as an ideological and racist manner against Italians and Christians. Oh, God. Grippa's gripe dates back to February 2018, when Greco offered discounted tickets to Arab speakers in recognition of the museum's relics coming from Egypt, and as a way to promote dialogue between the two cultures. So he's woke. He was woke before woke became a buzzword in 2018. So he gave discounted tickets to Arabic speakers to come to this museum which is showing off Egyptian artifacts. Now, I don't know if these artifacts were stolen by the Italian Empire, in the 1920s and 1930s, or they're gifts on loan from museums in Egypt. But anyway, he decided, well, wouldn't it be a nice thing to bridge these cultural differences and offer discounted tickets to Arabic speakers? But of course, the far right don't like this. But the initiative sparked protest outside the museum, probably organized by, the political parties, not some sort of spontaneous protest. One of the most successful in Europe, from the far right, including Meloni, whose Brothers of Italy party polled less than 4% at the time. Meloni described the idea as idiotic and discriminatory towards Italians before coming to power last October, and has railed against Islamization. Okay. The issue re-emerged after Maurizio Marrone, Brothers of Italy welfare councillor for the Piemonte region, told the Turin edition of the Corriere della Sera this week that Greco's mandate would probably not be renewed because they felt that there were more qualified figures. Leadership of Piedmont fell into the hands of the right-wing coalition in regional elections last year. The left in Italy is all over the fucking place. It's a disgrace. The left really are. It's like the Labour Party a few years ago, infighting, purity tests, and it's just a mess. Anyway. And of course, the right wing are always united. They hate always the same thing. Immigrants, foreigners, foreign stuff. And it's very easy to rally around those things. It's, for the right, it's always easy to... and you look at pretty much any country in the world, we hate foreigners. That's a rallying cry for the right, far right, and the centre right. And they're always on board, and there's very little infighting. Yes, there's a bit of infighting now with the Conservatives over Brexit to a certain extent, but this culture, on how to win the next election, the more moderates and the headbangers. But in Italy, the far right and the right have always been well united, unfortunately. In an interview with La Stampa on Thursday, Greco, an Italian who previously worked abroad, defended his track record, saying that that political interference only exists in Italy. I don't know if that's true, but maybe he's right. I don't know if you have in Britain. Well, the Tories are trying to influence things like the National Trust. Can you imagine if the museum was the National Museum in England in London was you had the Tories attacking the curator or the director, the museum director. Or the Tate Modern. Can you imagine if the Tate Modern or the Imperial War Museum, some of these were attacked because they were being too woke or something like that? Maybe it's just a matter of time. So I hope that the curator holds on to his job. I hope that the government are embarrassed by this. But of course, they're supported by headbangers, and the headbangers want blood. Unfortunately, I think the curator, the director of this museum, will probably lose his job. He'll be But I hope the next government that come into power reinstate him if they can. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream. I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on. Let me read more of your comments before we finish. Racist, criticizing someone attempting to bring communities together. Typical, yes. We don't want harmony. You know, the racists will say we don't want, you know, these people don't integrate. All these asylum seekers coming here, they don't integrate. Okay, let's have a policy where we integrate them, where we bring the communities together, the community of the home country and the asylum seekers communities. Let's bring them together in some sort of harmony. No, we don't want that. That's because fascism is not an ideology, but an anti-ideology. They define themselves on what they are against, not by what they are for. Well said, Archangel. It's against everything. We're against progress. We're against modern art back in the 1920s and 30s. We're against this. We're against that. We're against gay rights. We're against the environment. We're against all of these. Against technology. Against new things. Against progress. David, thanks so much for that super chat. Max, the Supreme Court rulings on referenda make it clear that there is power in the ballot box section 79 to 81. So a general election and international support will be enough. There's me corrected. Well said. So it seems if the Supreme Court, as you said, the Supreme Court said that if the ballot box says it, it's not our decision, but if the ballot box says it, then that is sufficient. Thanks so much, David. My only fear with some of this is that it may be difficult for some countries to come forward. I don't know how many countries would be necessary to support. Like, for example, the Republic of Ireland, I'm sure, would support Scottish independence. But it could be difficult for some other countries to come forward because they may feel pressured by the UK government to not support Scottish independence. So it would be interesting to see how many countries would come forward and would it be sufficient. But I think for harmony, the Labour Party should offer a Section 30 and say, look, the Scottish people, if they want to vote to leave the Union, they should have that choice. If they want to vote to stay, they should have that choice. It's not up to us to decide for the Scottish people. It's up to them. And I think this would be the best way to go, instead of forcing alternative routes. Never mind Longford, visit Cavan instead. Of course you would say that, Cavan lad. Telt, yes, I'm Telt. Anyway, so guys, thank you so much for all of your support tonight. Thank you so much for coming on. Hope you had a nice evening, and hope you have a nice weekend. And make sure, if you can, to attend the Rejoin March tomorrow, starting from the Hilton Hotel, I believe, and some really interesting speakers at it, including Liz Webster, who will be on the Sunday Roast on Sunday, and my co-host Political X will be there too. I think it's in London. Tomorrow. Yes. There's a lot of information, so do check it out. Do check out the time. I don't have the times, but do check them out. You should be able to find them online. So guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Sunday Roast. If I don't see you then, I'll see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. Good night. And before we finish, of course, we have our one for the road. No Matt Green tonight, but someone just as good.
But why did he come out and say that he's now going to scrap a meat tax, that nobody should have to have 7 bins? I thought it was 7 streams of recycling.
Kate, it doesn't really matter because even if those were hypothetical proposals that might come out, constituents were very worried about them. You know, I had a constituent writing to me saying, if there's 7 bins, I've got a very small kitchen. Where will the dog sit? My kitchen will become more bin than kitchen. I don't want to live in a bin house. And I've had old people writing to me saying, please don't tax our meat. Don't tax our meat. It's all we have in life. Life is very grim with social care being cut. But you know, at least we have our meat.
But why did he come out and say that he's now going to scrap?
At least we have our meat. So guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Sunday, or on the Sunday Roast, or on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. Have a great one. I'll see you soon. Good night and take care.